Hello and welcome to Just Films and That with me, Josh Hallam.
And me, Alice Oliver. This is the podcast where we talk about films that we think are underrated, underappreciated, or we just wanted to talk about them.
We're also going to get stuck into some classic films that one of us maybe hasn't seen, and maybe throw in some great guests along the way. So, every week we start with a random question. Alice, what is your signature dish to cook? Whether that be for friends, for your other half, for yourself.
I'm going to disappoint you here. So I'm really not much of a cook. I'm really basic when it comes to food. Like, I'm just like, the more basic, the better. So, I do a mean jacket potato, but that's about as far as it goes. Like, I just like, jacket potatoes and salad, or like I'll make pasta and salad. I don't really cook. I don't think I've ever cooked for anyone. Like, maybe a couple of times for boyfriends in the past, but I don't even know if I've ever cooked for my husband. But he's a bit more of a cook, so that kind of also takes the pressure off me a little bit. But no, I'm just such a basic bitch when it comes to food, just like plain ass food. But I know you are quite a dab hand in the kitchen, Josh. What's yours? What's like your main go-to that is just always a pleaser?
I do like to cook. I think the one that I do quite a lot that people who I've had over for dinner have asked me to do again is I make a chicken and chorizo pie. And it's like chicken chorizo and wine and parsley and cream and all this. And it's a very sort of decadent pie. So probably that, chicken and chorizo pie. Or I also do I quite like cooking Italian food as well. So anything like a good spag bol, or first thing I ever learned to cook, bar like putting stuff in the oven, so actually cooking from scratch, was a corned beef hash.
Ooh,
And
okay.
I didn't know what simmer meant, so I thought simmer meant just take it off the heat and let the dish absorb the water. So I was making corned beef hash for my flatmates at the time, and I got all the stuff in the pot, and the corned beef and the carrots and the potatoes and the stock and all that. And then I started the water boiling, and then I just took it off the heat and left it for 2 hours. And people were going, "Where's this corned beef hash?" And I was just going, "Well, it's simmering, isn't it? It's just simmering." And needless to say, someone took over and finished it, and it was nice in the end. But yeah, didn't know what simmer meant. So we'll move on to talking about this week's film. Alice, you picked this one. We're going to be talking about All Dogs Go to Heaven, which is from 1989. So spoilers if you've not seen that. Alice, interesting to know with this one. So what's it about, and why did you pick it?
So, All Dogs Go to Heaven is the story of Charlie, who's a German shepherd, and he gets murdered by his sort of former friend and his business partner, I think. And he's called Carface. But he withdraws from his place in heaven to return to Earth, but that means he can never go back. But he and his friend Itchy on Earth, they become responsible for a young orphan named Anne-Marie, who is being held captive by Carface. And all Anne-Marie wants is a mum and dad. And though unwilling at first, Charlie sort of makes that happen, securing his place in heaven once again at the end of the film. And the reason I picked it was because in my memory, so I'm pretty sure I'd only seen it once as a very young child. And my memory of it was that it was very emotional and it really made me well up, and that it just kind of gave me a load of the feels. So I guess this is kind of like a revisit for me, but also an underseen, I think, because I don't really hear it ever come up at all, like in sort of the famous animated films. I believe that the guys who made it, the same guys who did Land Before Time, another one which I absolutely love, and I feel like more people know about that than knew about this one. So I just kind of wanted to revisit, see if those old feelings were kind of still there. Josh, had you seen this one? I don't think you had you?
No. So I think I'd heard of it, but I'm not entirely sure if I'd heard of it or if I just heard of the phrase "dogs go to heaven." So I don't know. I'd certainly not seen it before. I knew a little bit about the filmmakers, like you say, Don. I think he's called Don Bluth. He made he made this and he made Land Before Time, but he actually made another film which I really like called Anastasia, which is the story of the sort of missing Russian princess. That was probably about 10 years after he made this, and that's like a really, you get these films that are Disney, but they're not made, like they're usually made by DreamWorks or someone else like that. So, and people often mistake them for Disney because they follow that same sort of basic formula where there's songs and that sort of thing. But Anastasia for me is like one of those that's like it's actually probably on my list. If I look at it, it's on my list of films to possibly suggest, which I won't for a while now that you've picked this. Thanks, but
always ruining your plans.
Yeah, but yeah, it's a really good one. So I was aware of the director, so I sort of went into this feeling like I'd be in good hands. But I was really intrigued why you picked it because this is quite a left field choice, if you like, for a film choice, not something I'd heard of. So having rewatched it again, what did you think?
So I'll be honest, Josh, I was pretty underwhelmed. I didn't feel those similar feelings that I thought that I'd felt the first time. And I just wonder if maybe I'd given myself a few false memories about it. I thought some of the animation was beautiful, especially like when they're outdoors and some of the buildings and some of the landscapes and the skylines. I thought that was really, really lovely. I'd completely forgotten that it was a musical. So when they started singing, I was like, oh, okay. So that had totally slipped my mind. But in general, though, I was quite disappointed. So I think I will go to you first to see if you have any more positive things to say, and then we'll just sort of run through the reasons why I feel a bit let down by it. But what were your kind of initial thoughts when you came away?
It's interesting you say that. Yeah, I mean, I tried to go into it with an open mind because it's a family film. It's not, specifically aimed at kids, but it's definitely not aimed for a 30-year-old man to sit and watch on his own. I think that's fairly safe to say. So I tried to find things I liked about it. It's not that I was underwhelmed because I didn't really go in with any expectations like you did, but there was things, like you said, that we'll come on to that was a little bit, not as good as other stuff. But there was things I liked about it. So for example, I did, like you've already said, I really like the animation, and the animation mixed with the setting of New Orleans. It's set in New Orleans in the 30s. I think makes for a really great picture. So New Orleans, I mean, I've never been. I'd absolutely love to go. It's my partner's like bucket list destination is New Orleans or probably the Maldives. Two places I'll never be able to afford for us to go anyway. But it looks amazing. It's always pictured as this place that's so full of life and color and street stalls and music and everyone's having fun, and you think of Mardi Gras and just a big old great hell of a fun time, I guess. And that really helps when you sort of set an animation there for me, because it is this, as I say, this world of this sort of color, as well as you get that really sort of stylized architecture that everyone's familiar with, a little bit like Meet Me in St. Louis, which I know is set in Missouri, but it's that sort of Southern American type architecture that you think of with porches and deck and rocking chairs on the front lawn and this amazing sort of these amazing structures.
Oh, certainly, yeah, and it really did a good job of giving it that kind of festival feel, or like that carnival feel. Like there were a lot of scenes that were really busy, and there was always loads of sounds going on. You really did feel like the hustle and bustle of it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, you did. And then, again, New Orleans is great for things like soundscapes, because it's set on a bayou, which is kind of like a sort of like a marsh or a swamp. A lot of films that are set there are, you've got this backdrop of constantly crickets chirping and clear skies and moonlight lighting up the water, and it always looks so picturesque, and that picturesque even. And when you sort of juxtapose that with when they're in the junkyard, again, it looks really good. And it reminded me a little bit of another animation, which is The Princess and the Frog. If you've not seen it, which is obviously several decades after this, that's a Disney film that's set in New Orleans. That is worth a watch. But then if you also, what is really good about it in terms of the way it looks is the animation, because it's sort of an animation from the 80s, and I don't know that much about how it was made, but I get the impression a lot of it was hand drawn, and because it is that, it seems that it's a lot stiller. So almost like what you get is these big, great sort of landscape pictures which look like paintings, and then the camera, if you will zoom in on where the action's happening, but everything else stays still. So it almost looks like you're being drawn into this painting, if you like. And it reminded me of things like old school animation like Cinderella and Snow White, where you see a big storybook and then it goes into the storybook and you see this forest or whatever, except it's, it's New Orleans. So I like that. I thought it looked really good.
Yeah, certainly. And the one moment that really you made me just think of there, I think it's when the rat race is going on, isn't it? Where they're actually racing rats, and there's these crowds and crowds of these dogs sort of up in the stands watching, and all the audience, it's all freeze frame, isn't it? Or it's all just kind of an outline. You're just sort of getting the impression of it. It's not the full picture. And yeah, I see what you mean. That almost makes it more immersive, and it's kind of teetering the sort of line between a film and a painting, and you sort of get that kind of in between. I find that's quite impactful. It sometimes it felt older than 1989 a lot of the time to me. Like I feel like it was from an era way gone by.
Yeah, no, it did. It could have been. It's almost like it was purposely made to look like that because it's set in the 30s. I'm not too sure. I mean, the fact that it's set in the 30s isn't really. It's not really important to the plot, is it? It just is. It's almost set in the 30s so that it looks prettier.
Well, I thought that maybe somehow the war was going to come into it for some reason because it was 1939, but it didn't really. I don't think. I mean, not that I could see that the year wasn't particularly relevant to the story. It could have been like you could have told me it was 1939 or 1928 or 1949.
Unless there's something to do with dogs taking over New Orleans in 1939 that's sort of been omitted from history. You don't know. These things happen, fake news. But no, and again, I'm a sucker for anything with animals. I do love dogs and animals in all senses. They do a really good job in this of sort of characterizing each dog differently and getting all the different breeds, right? You've got Charlie, who, first of all, main character's name is Charlie B. Barkin. So, I mean, that's a win from me. That's a point on its own, Charlie B. Barkin. And then you get him. He's a German Shepherd. He's full of energy. You get his friend who's always itching himself, like dogs do. They're always itching with their hind legs. Then you got the villain Carface, who's sort of like I think he's like a big sort of bulldog of some sort with this fantastic voice, this fantastic raspy villainous sort of voice, this big hulking brute of a character. Then you get other dogs who are they come along the way. You get the English collie that is his friend who's got all the puppies that she's looking after. You get all the puppies, which are obviously adorable. And I really like the humanization of dogs, or the personification, if you like, of dogs when you see it in cartoons and in films and stuff like that. It's always something that I find really endearing, and I do think they do a good job in this film of that. And I think what they do really well is they create a world that's almost parallel to the human world, where dogs, a bit like something like A Bug's Life, where there's a bug world and a human world, and they just sort of don't really intertwine apart from occasionally. And like you say, in this, that's what they do. So it's like the Charlie seems to run some sort of underground casino with Carface, where they bet on races, except it's not horses, it's rats. So they're betting on the races. And there's other times when they're making loads of money from gambling, and you see them watching all these mad animal sports. Like there's obviously there's the rat race, and there's kangaroo boxing as well. I think there's something to do with frogs swimming, or that's it, tortoises swimming, isn't it? Yeah. And so by creating that world, that allows you to sort of draw a box around the characterization of the dogs and explain why they're acting that way and why they're humanized. And that really helped with making them likable for me. But yeah, no, I mean, I thought it was okay. So let's move on to what you were saying. What did you like about it before we move on to the disappointment, or was there not really anything?
Those were the main two things really that you covered. So the way it looked, and also like how distinct all the different dogs were. So it was quite fun to guess what breed everything was, and just kind of see if their sort of personality traits and that did fit in, with our expectations of those breeds. And like you said about them being sort of a mirror to sort of human beings and to human activity. It was almost as if the famous painting of the dogs playing poker. Yeah. It was like, what if we made a film of this? It's like, because they're the naughtiest dogs. They're so naughty. It's all gambling and drinking and trying to murder one another. And
I like that I like that when they're betting with food.
Yeah.
Did you notice that,
Yeah.
like, when they're placing bets, he's like just betting like a T-bone steak or something, as opposed to like money. I thought that was good. Anyway, sorry, as you were saying.
No, yeah, that was kind of mostly what I was just going to say. So I didn't really think the songs were any good. Like they weren't like catchy. They didn't really flow. They didn't have like any pizzazz to them. And I don't want to compare everything to Disney. I really don't. But Disney writes some of the best film songs ever. Like just catchy. They flow well. The rhymes are usually great. And with this, it just kind of felt. I feel like it would have been more impactful without the songs. I just don't feel like they were necessary at all.
I agree. So that was one of the things I noted about like what anything I didn't like about it. I there wasn't a memorable song in it. It didn't add anything that it was a musical. Like with Anastasia, which is the same director. The songs in that are really, really memorable. They're as memorable as Disney songs. There's a couple of songs in there. There's at least 3 I can think off the top of my head, which are memorable. Whereas this, I couldn't tell you a single song that's in it. There's probably some sort of pun on a dog's life, or I don't know, Bones or something. I don't know, and there's also not that much actual singing in it. So the music, they start these musical numbers, and it's just a lot of sort of talking. It's a lot of talk. It's sort of like, I'm the main character and I'm singing a song now because the actor can't really sing. So let's just talk to the audience, but in a rhythm, and that I think that you can get away with that in films like Disney films where you've got singers as well as people who can't sing. So if you look at, like, for example, Hercules that we did, there's loads of really great songs in that. And then there's a song that Danny DeVito's character does where he's not really singing, he's just sort of talking. But it works because it's surrounded by other songs that are memorable. Same in The Lion King, there's loads of really memorable songs. And then Scar's song, sorry, Be Prepared, is just Jeremy Irons talking. So that works. But in this, there's no actual singing in it. And so not only are the songs not memorable, but they're sort of obviously quite poor. They're obviously quite a poor part of the film, and I thought that was a bit of a shame.
Yeah, definitely. And the music sort of wasn't particularly catchy, but yeah, I think, like you say, it just felt like the actors couldn't really sing. I imagine they weren't hired. It's almost as if they didn't do a singing audition. It was just, oh, that these are going to be the voice actors. It's like, oh, but by the way, there's also a couple of songs in it. Can you give it your best shot? So I didn't really like any of the dogs, which completely surprised me because I honestly expected to go into it and just fall in love with all of them. And when I think about things like Homeward Bound or Lady and the Tramp, it's like those dogs are so likable and beautiful, and you just think, oh, you're such a good boy. But with these with these ones, I was just like, I just didn't feel connected to any of them. And I don't know if it's just because they didn't have particularly like likable personalities. Like they were all just kind of a bit rough around the edges. They were all kind of a bit like scumbags, really. And that really, I think that had a lot to do with why it fell flat for me, because I just didn't fall in love with any of the characters. And I definitely completely, fully expected to, because they are dogs and I just love dogs.
I'm the same as you. I love dogs, so you think a lot of them are almost likable by default. So it goes a long way to talk about the film having a fault when some of the dogs weren't likable. Itchy, I thought, was quite likable because he is sort of quite affable and cute and stuff. And obviously the puppies are cute, and the way that they animate the puppies to act like puppies in the way that they can't climb stairs quite yet and all that sort of thing is very cute. The main problem for me, I thought, was that Charlie is the main character and he's a prick.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
if he was a person, he's a bit of a scumbag, and he's not like a lovable. I think he's supposed to be a lovable rogue on this sort of story of redemption, but he's actually a bit of a prick on the story of redemption, and he sort of doesn't deserve the redemption at the end. It's a bit of a strange one.
Yeah, it's
Um,
like he's not really doing anything great all along, and then at the end it's like, oh no, but you did it and now you can come into heaven. And it just felt a bit unsatisfying. The other thing as well, German shepherds are really fucking loyal. And he just like, well, I mean, I guess he's kind of loyal to Itchy, but he's not very nice to Anne Marie. And he sort of, says that he's just using her just to kind of get what he wants and all this. And it was just, this is my fault for obviously having preconceived ideas of how I think dogs should behave, and he just wasn't it, I think, for me. Something funny that really sort of stood out to me. So we've got Anne Marie's potential new parents, haven't we? Harold and the lady whose name escapes me just now. But so Charlie steals their wallet, I think, to get their money off them. And then Anne-Marie obviously thinks that this is awful, and so she goes to try and take it back. Or it's when Itchy turns up at the house. One of the characters turns up at the human's house anyway, and it's nighttime and they're in bed, and the lady is wearing the sexiest sort of outfit you could possibly imagine. It's like this tiny little skin tight pink nightie with this like sheer pink sort of dressing gown and high heels. It's like they've just come out of bed. I was like, what is this? Like, what am I meant to be thinking when I see this?
Maybe,
I just kind of didn't get it.
Maybe they weren't asleep in bed. I mean, maybe those dogs interrupted. I mean, they want to adopt the kid. Who's to say they're not sort of trying for one?
Yeah, no, definitely. But it just kind of felt a bit jarring, and I was just
I know what you mean.
And he wasn't sexy, though. He wasn't wearing sexy clothes. He was just wearing, like, normal pajamas and dressing gown, but she was, like, really sort of, like they were up to something.
But he also is quite chiseled. It's just that he's got glasses on. He's like Clark Kent. He's like geeky, sexy, but also definitely spends some time in the 1939 gym.
Yeah, wow, I wonder what that looked like.
just weights, probably. Loads of eggs.
Yeah. I did feel a lot of the way through that the characters were quite two-dimensional. It just didn't really feel like that there was much going on with any of them. And I didn't really find the script itself particularly gripping. I don't know what you thought about the writing. How did you feel about that?
So, yeah, a little bit simplistic, a little bit all over the place. Like, it's not quite sure what it wants to be. And that's one of the problems, again, I had with it, which was okay, like I've said, it's not really aimed at me. That's fine. However, I found myself really bored. And even the best family films, you shouldn't be finding yourself bored, even if it's not necessarily for you. There should be something to keep your attention. So, yeah, I thought the script was a bit all over the place. The characterization of the main characters was a bit all over the place. And it was just a bit, I can't really think of a better way to describe it other than a little bit boring in places.
Really disappointing, isn't it? I just wonder what went on. It's like, why and how did they miss the mark so much? I don't know. Maybe it was just more effort that needed to go into the writing, maybe just develop the characters a little bit more, maybe do more with the script. There needed to be more of an arc as well for Charlie. Like it's okay for him to start off as being a bit naff and a bit of a prick. Like you say, if there is this sort of really kind of in-depth progression of his character, but you just didn't really get that. And then it was just at the end, oh no, he gets to go to heaven anyway because all dogs just by default go to heaven. And it's like, well, no, all dogs, like we know dogs now, get to go to heaven because they're lovely and they're sweet and they're just the best things ever. But those dogs were all just a bit naff. The other thing I found a bit daft as well is that obviously Charlie went to heaven and he saw it and he got to see that it existed. Why would he want to go back down to earth? Like, I never get this. Yeah. I never get this with things with the afterlife. Like, if you find out that heaven does exist and you get to go to heaven, you're going to stay there. Surely you're not going to risk not being able to go back in. And the whippet that sort of, meets him when he gets there says you won't be able to come back if you go. And he still goes anyway. I find that insane.
Yeah, and why does he want to go back? So he can live in a car in a junkyard? Like, well, then if it's heaven, you can live wherever you want. Like, that's the whole point of heaven. It doesn't make any sense. No, you are right. I think for me, the problem with the script is a lack of exposition. Why? The film just starts, and it starts with Charlie being broken out the pound by Itchy, and it's a good start to a film. It starts with a good action beat, and you're in there. However, if you're going to start with a scene like that, like an action scene, then you do it, and then you have a beat, and then you sort of build your exposition into the beginning and the middle of the film. But they don't do that. So Charlie comes across like a prick rather than a lovable rogue because there's no reason why he is the way he is. If all dogs by default are so sweet and lovely and loyal that they get into heaven in this world, then what happened to Charlie to make him like this? Is it just survival instinct, or what made him a rogue? Is it a bit like Thomas O'Malley from the Aristocats? I know that's a cat.
O'Malley, Alley
I know that's a cat and not a dog. But what I mean is they write something into his story. Or the tramp, I suppose, would have been a better example of a bloody dog, of that he didn't have an owner. So because he doesn't have an owner, or he's abandoned by his owner, he's had to survive on the street. So he's developed a bit of a rough edge, a bit of an armor, if you will. But Charlie, there's none of that with Charlie. He's just running a casino with his fat bulldog cigar smoking mate who then betrays him. And it's just not. Yeah, it's just not made to be likable enough. You need to explore that for me. And I know it's a kids' film, but kids smart. Kids kids would get that.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it's interesting that I know we've commented before some films where they just overdo the exposition, and it's like, well, there's no talent in that. I want to see something. I don't need you to tell me everything. But in this, there was just none. And it just left you just with so many questions, I think, and just kind of feeling a bit empty about the whole thing. You got to find that right balance. Like, we obviously need some exposition. We need to know a bit about who these characters are, what their story is, what their motivations are. Because what is even their motivation for doing the casino? Do they want loads of money? Is it just that they want to be really successful? Is it that they want to have access to the best food? Like, it's just kind of like, I don't know. I just like, what do they want? What do any of these characters want? I don't know.
Is it not? Is it does he run the casino because he wants to get enough money, or dog money, whatever it is in the film, to be able to move away, and his dream is to go and live on an island as a dog, or go to some sort of dog haven where he can have a lovely life? Because really, like you've just said, you've just poked the biggest hole in it. If you die and go to heaven and it's game over, then why would you want to go back if you already know you've won the jackpot? Why would you keep playing the lottery?
Mm-hmm. Heaven exists. Like that's what everybody secretly hopes for, even as atheists. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, why would you turn that back? I don't think I would. If I died and came back, I was like, oh, I went to heaven. It's pretty shit, to be honest. All that eternal bliss, not really for me.
Yeah, everyone I've ever known was there. It was shit.
Yeah. Give me a life of bills and pain and going grey.
I'd rather get up and have to actually live and struggle. Live in my fucking junkyard car. Oh.
Yeah.
So we'll move on to talking about the critical reception then. Now, I know you've picked this mainly because it's underseen, but we like to take a look at the critical reception. How do you think this did critically, roughly?
You know what? I mean, probably not that great. Like, if I was going to mark it, it would probably be one of the lowest that we've done. I mean, not as low as 40 Days and 40 Nights, but definitely, like, I just wasn't. Like I've seen films before where either I don't like the story, or I don't like the character or something, but you can see the value in it. Like, you can see something like, oh, the script was great, or like it was shot really well, or there's something. I really do try to see the value in everything. And with this, there just wasn't much going for it, I don't think. But like, maybe the people who are rating it could rate it quite high because if they like animation, maybe they like the animation style, maybe they like, that it is a bit, a bit of a kid's film, but is it really? I don't really know. Like, maybe, like, I'd probably give it like a 5, like just plonk it there. And even then, I feel like maybe that's a bit generous.
Very sort of middle of the road. Yeah. So IMDb gives it 6.8 out of 10 at the time of recording.
Wow.
And the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is 63. So, not that dissimilar, sort of like you say, 6 middle of the 6s out of 10. Then the critics on Rotten Tomatoes, and this is probably close to what you would think, is 44%.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we've talked before about critics watching family films and not necessarily looking at it with the right glasses on, shall we say. But I looked at some of the critical reception, and I do think that they actually made some good points. So there's one here that just says basically the plotting is best kept simple for younger viewers, but it's a bit unfocused and all over the place and overcomplicated, that it's a bit boring and difficult to follow is one of them, sort of in a gist. And then another one that says that it's a film that looks really good but lacks a good protagonist. So that's kind of both the things we've already said, and I think I'm inclined to agree with them. I don't know about you, I'd say that the audience scores, if you will, from Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb are probably a little generous.
I think so, yeah.
I probably would side with the side of the critics. So the film looks good. It does look really good, but that's about where its qualities start and end for me, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and sadly, I agree. And you know what? When I picked this, I really thought it was going to be. I just didn't expect coming out the other end and feeling this way. But that's why this podcast is so interesting, because it makes you do that, doesn't it? It makes you go back and reevaluate things and kind of try and really see the quality in things and analyze things from all different avenues. So I do appreciate that. But yeah, I was disappointed. Didn't think I'd feel this way, but yeah, that appropriately rated with the 4 point. What was it? 4.8? Did you say, a 48, 44?
44% from the critics. Yeah, no, you're right. And you know what? You pick this because of sort of nostalgia in a way, and nostalgia can take a film a long way when times have changed and filmmaking styles have changed, and you can look back and go, things were different, but I like this because of X, Y, and Z, and I watched it at this time in my life. There's plenty of films where nostalgia will take it so far. Unfortunately for this, there wasn't enough about the film where you clearly could go, yeah, but it's this, because it's just a bit sort of drab. It's like it's one of those sort of meh films. If I could sum it up in a noise, it's meh.
Yeah, definitely. It is a bit meh. And when I think about other films where I've sort of gone back to because, maybe for nostalgia reasons and wondered, oh, am I only doing this for nostalgia? Like, I think about Tremors, and like I loved that film when I was a kid. And then I watched it again for this podcast and I love it now. Like, it still absolutely bangs. And with this, it just didn't. It was, as you very eloquently put it, Josh, it was pretty meh.
So there we are. Another one that is added to the underseen pile, but unfortunately, nostalgia didn't pay off for Alice, and now she's sad, aren't you, Alice? So
I am sad. I am sad. They're probably the only dogs that didn't deserve to go to heaven.
Well, before we move on to talking about next week's film, before we pick next week's film, we'd just like to say, if you do get the time, if you could give us a little 5-star rating on your iTunes or Apple Podcast app, that would be great. It helps other people notice us. It helps the pod keep going. So if you could just, it takes a couple of seconds, just get on your phone, tap the old 5 stars. Even if you don't like us, tap 5 stars. Takes a few seconds. I don't like me, and I've given us 5 stars. So,
I don't like Josh either.
Yeah, and Alice has done it. So please, it only takes a second, and it would be very, very much appreciated.
So Josh, we're going to be doing your pick for next week. What are we watching?
Next week, we're going to be watching and talking about Ed Wood, which is a Tim Burton and Johnny Depp film from, I think, about 1993. So if you haven't seen that, please do watch it, because it's well worth a look, and we'll talk about it next week.
Very exciting.
If you would like to get in touch with the podcast, if you've got a film we would like to suggest, or if you'd like to give us an opinion on a film that we've done already and we can read it out on the show, it's filmsandthatpod@gmail.com. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. It's @filmsandthat or @filmsandthatpod. Just look for Just Films and That and you'll find us. Alice, thanks very much for joining me.
Josh, thank you as always. It's been a pleasure.
And it's goodbye from me. Cheerio.
Bye.